Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, today I will unfortunately need a mic, even though my voice is quite well known for being suitable on stage, even without technical devices. But today I'm really sorry. I am a little bit unfortunate to not be in my best shape. Nevertheless, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for joining this panel on the cybersecurity of critical systems. This is going to be a topic for our discussion, and my name is Joanna Świątkowska. As was already mentioned, I'm the CEO of the ECSO European Cybersecurity Organization. As such, I will try today to emphasize elements related to the topic that are critical from the point of view of international cooperation. And of course, we are here within the business stream, so we will try to catch to those two angles which are critical for the topic of our discussion. Let me start by saying that the topic of critical infrastructure has been present on all of the cybersecurity conferences for years. Experts spend endless hours talking about threats to critical infrastructure, countermeasures, cooperation, so on and so forth, you name it. So you might right now ask yourself a question: was it a good choice to join this session? You might also ask a question if I'm a good host to sell the panel in this fashion. But rest assured that it is going to be a wonderful time. It is going to be super interesting time, and let me give you at least two reasons why it's going to be like that. First and foremost, we are indeed in unprecedented times of geopolitical conflict, and as you know very well, the full-fledged war is conducted next to the borders of the country that we are currently at. So today, we are not going to talk about theoretical aspects of what can happen if. Today, we are about to discuss real issues, real problems, and we are destined to find answers that would apply right here, right now. So this is one of the reasons why it was a good choice to join us. The second element comes from the fact that my dear colleagues, my second family from the CYBERSEC, did an excellent job in composing such a wonderful lineup of the speakers. I won't do a second introduction, but you know that that my colleagues managed to gather top-notch experts, key political leaders, so it's going to be a splendid discussion. With that, and because we are running a little bit out of time, I will jump straight to the discussion. And I would like to start and direct the first question to Mr. Minister Andrijanić. And actually, quite general question that I hope that will set the scene for the rest of the debate. Mr. Minister, it has been almost 3 months, 90 days since the war in Ukraine started. We had a lot of time to observe what's happening out there, and we know very well by now that the conflict is run not only in the physical realm, but also in the cyberspace. So what have we learned up until now based on the conflict? What can we say about the cybersecurity of critical systems and mainly their resiliency? Could you please share your general observations, please?
Thank you very much for this excellent question. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and big thanks to the organizers for bringing us all together. I think that's great. Now, I think we learned a lot of lessons over the past couple of months. I would say the number one lesson is that there's no need to panic. Our core systems have proven resilient, which is great news. But I would say that there's a big need for enhanced collaboration between member states, for, I would say, additional regulation in the area of cybersecurity, and obviously for vigilance across the Union. Now, I would say that the European Union has been active on all of these fronts. As you know, when it comes to the regulation, we have the Network and Information Security Directive in place, which is, I would say, the cornerstone of our cybersecurity legislation. The good news is that it's being updated and upgraded with the NIS2 directive. Only a couple of days ago, the European Council reached an agreement with the European Parliament on the NIS2 directive, which I think is a terrific news because it will ensure even greater cybersecurity across the continent. I'm very proud that the Slovenian presidency in December managed to achieve a general approach on NIS2 directive. That's why it's a piece of legislation that's very near and dear to my heart. Now, there are a lot of other positive developments that are going on in the European context. Let me mention the coordination that has been enabled by ENISA, the agency that's basically in charge of cybersecurity within the Union. We've seen national bodies cooperating with ENISA very well in terms of exchanging information, sharing best practices, and so on. But what's even more encouraging is that we're in the middle of the process of establishing the joint cybersecurity unit, which would basically be a European cybersecurity army, so to speak, and would basically take care of the European cyber shield, which is one of the ideas that the European Commission has been pushing forward, and obviously we've been embracing it since the beginning, but even more so over the past couple of months. Now, let me just say that there are also other important aspects when it comes to cybersecurity. It's not just about the critical systems. It's also about our businesses. It's also about our citizens. So it's super important for us at the national and at the European level to conduct awareness campaigns to make sure that all the citizens understand how to safely and responsibly navigate the cyberspace. It's also, I think, critical to support small and medium-sized businesses because they don't have the resources nor knowledge to implement proper cybersecurity measures. And this all brings me to the last point, which is talent. I think talent is critical. We have a critical shortage of IT talent across Europe and I can say across the world. But when it comes to cybersecurity specialists, they are in a very short demand, which means that we need to do more at the European level to make sure we produce enough cybersecurity experts by introducing new university or even high school programs, by investing more in reskilling of the existing workforce. But I would say that talent is absolutely critical. So maybe I can end with Winston Churchill's quote. He said a long time ago, whenever you're going through hell, just keep going. So I suggest we just keep going.
Let's do exactly that, Mr. Minister, and thank you very much for underlying so many different elements that we will discuss further, even on this panel, like for instance, what has happened recently at the EU level in terms of the brand new regulatory solutions that indeed might change the cybersecurity landscape. So we will come back to that. Thank you for introducing those elements. But I would like to, for a second, stick to what's happening in Ukraine. And I would like to direct the next question to Mr. Silicki. Can we, for a second, focus a little bit more on slightly more technical aspects? I'm pretty sure that our audience is very much interested in hearing more about special elements that characterize what's happening out there in terms of potentially methods, tools, TTPs, all what's interesting around cyber attacks over there, and maybe even specific threat scenarios that we are observing.
Thank you for this question. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. And the answer to this question may take like 6 hours because there's a lot of time, a lot of things to be analyzed. And of course, as Mr. Andrijanić said, we on one side, we can be relaxed because, well, there are several severe attacks on Ukrainian critical infrastructure and also attacks on European countries. but we as a cybersecurity community managed to resist. And what is important is just, from my perspective, is just to be aware that if we, this time is to take lessons from what happened in the past or currently is going on. And of course, your question was about TTP's threat scenarios and incident characteristics. And what we can say, well, during such a time, of course, those actors sponsored by government forces are performing really targeted and severe attacks to the infrastructure. So such examples like Industroyer 2 attack performed by Sandworm APT group attributed to Russia is one example. So it was attacked on the high-level energy substations in Ukraine, and attacker was using the next version of Industroyer malware, which was first used in 2016 on Ukraine. So all tactics, all elements that were ever developed before are using, and new ones are added on top on this. In this example, so you may observe that some new malware families are appearing, like new wipers. Up to now, we were talking about ransomware attacks, when somebody is encrypting your system for getting the ransom. In this attack on Ukraine, it's also attack on data of a system in ICT system of critical infrastructure, for instance. But the target is, or the attack vector is to destroy this. Just wipe out this from not expecting to get some revenue for this or ransom, let's say, but just to destroy. Or attacks for satellite company, which has customers in Ukraine, but also has customers in different other countries, to destroy the communication. This kind of attack on the Viasat company was just the same day when this Russian invasion started. And the lessons for us from this should be, let's imagine what kind of threat scenarios, risk scenarios, we can just imagine for the future. Because even if now we can fight against and successfully operate during the everyday DDoS attacks performed on Ukraine and our countries, it's fine. But the lesson or exercise we should, in my opinion, do currently is just to analyze this very carefully and try to imagine the scenarios for the future, because for sure there's a threat that in the maybe nearest future, maybe the farther future, we will face, we stand in front of some new threats and scenarios. That's why we, as a Poland, we are triggering discussion in the European Union about preparing that kind of threat scenarios for European infrastructure, risk scenarios for European infrastructure. And in the Council conclusions, which are drafted currently, I hope that we will see some recommendations to this direction when ENISA and other European actors will have the substantial role, because you cannot do it without the partnership between governments and industry and experts from independent independent companies. So and one more aspect is, as Mr. Andrijanić said, it also about the attack on the society. So disinformation campaigns. We not only we, but we are observing. We at NASK we are observing this very carefully. We are observing the huge peak of this disinformation campaigns, which are sometimes destroying somehow your awareness what is going on. So those attacks are sometimes covered. So one risks or incident scenarios or the incident vector is covered by DDoS attack, and on top of this is a disinformation campaign. So this intersection between this technological cybersecurity and disinformation is more and more important to be analyzed jointly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that at least one recommendation that I found super interesting in all of that you said is the fact that we need to follow the direction of building our cyber defense by analyzing threats and having this threat-driven approach across all the things that are being done, understanding our risk profile, understanding the goals, the motivation, and modus operandi of the threat actors seems to be the key and an essential aspect. Not only from the country perspective, but only if we are looking at the individual enterprises, organizations, so on and so forth. So thank you so much for highlighting this extremely important aspect. But let's go back to the cooperation, and I would like to direct this question to Madam Ilves, if I may. Still not about the European one, but if we can focus about something that is regional, hence maybe closer to the hearts of the audience here in Katowice, because I would like to speak about the cooperation from the CE perspective. So there is an upcoming 3Cs summit that will be hosted in Riga, and we are very curious to hear and have a sneak peek on what will happen out there and how important cybersecurity is gonna be for the leadership of your country. So if you can just, tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, gladly, and again, thanks again for inviting me back on stage. I'm really happy to share, also in the context that Riga will be hosting, like you said, the head of state, the president of Latvia will be hosting the annual Summit of 3Cs initiative. But let me say, in the same vein or in context, or continuing actually Churchill's quote, staying on Churchill, sort of war prime minister, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. I think that's part of, also of this region of Central and Eastern Europe, which is the same 3Cs initiative. For those who are not familiar, those are 12 countries between Baltic, Black, and Adriatic seas that came together with purpose sort of to work together to attract more investment, to prosper, to connect themselves better as a one powerful region. I think there's a lot of good reason for that. We are a very fast growing region. We have proven being very innovative. A lot of innovation comes from the Central Eastern Europe. We have a quite digitized region comparing to some of older Western countries. So there's a lot of potential, especially if we work together. Of course, now when we put the summit that will take place in Riga, of course, to no surprise, Ukraine obviously will be a dominant sort of topic around what the discussions will happen. So the three big segments of 3C's initiative is energy, transport, and digital. Obviously, the moment you think that in the context of war, you see a lot of impact. You will see the debate and discussion around these three topics, how that has changed. I think it's clear with energy, what impact the war has, how we have to rethink the energy and dependency in Europe, also how Central and Eastern Europe is reorienting itself. I think also the green energy and the question how we can have a sustainable energy will be very much on table. I think digital is not far away from that. We know that the digital solutions will be needed to actually be able to evaluate, innovate, and figure it out. Transportation, think again about all the communication lines for businesses, for roads, seas, different ones. I'm sure Ukraine will win the war. Ukraine will win the war on their terms. We will be living next to the door of a country who is incredibly aggressive and we can't prognose. We will have to rearrange our strategic infrastructure, the critical infrastructure, including transport, roads, how we continue the businesses across the globe, how we continue business with Asia, how we continue business with different other countries that are not Russia, but are important partners for Europe, for us. Central Eastern Europe will become a big puzzle piece that connects Europe with all the other countries besides Russia, but the Black Sea, think of roots of connection, think of embracing Ukraine as it will be rebuilding its past back and sort of rebuilding back in Europe. So I see a lot there on agenda. Obviously, the war has put a focus on this region, but let's not use it to sort of complain and scare away. Let's use that opportunity to invest. What unites all of our countries is that we understand in a very sober way what is this region about and how one has to act. None of our countries were surprised by the war. None of our countries are surprised by the way how Russia acts, including in digital domain. So we are very much well positioned and prepared. The question is how we work together and how we turn that into sort of benefit, or at least how we turn that, if not in benefits, then how we turn it to make this region prosperous, successful, and sort of build up on our capacity. So I really hope all the leaders who will come together in Riga at the end of June 2021, it will be a political discussion and it will be a business forum. So I hope to see a lot of that debate focused on what can we do and how we can achieve the success.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more with the statement that our countries indeed understand the reality very well, at least when it comes to the geopolitical situations in this region. So let's stay a while with this topic, and if I may ask Mr. Minister Jabłoński to tell us a little bit more about Polish perspective, because yeah, I mean, the whole reason why Poland was among the countries that actually launched the Free Seas initiative was because we do understand the reality of the region and we know that we need to interact with each other and cooperate. And back then when the initiative was started, Poland quite vocally supported the idea of having digital dimension as a part of the concept. But I want to ask you for your opinion about the development so far in this area. What has been done? What have we achieved? Why not enough? And also, if that's the case, and also if you can tell us a little bit more about your expectation when it comes to the upcoming summit and what should be our priority in those times.
Thank you. It is indeed very important to assess what was done in the context of all the three pillars of Three Seas Initiative: transport, energy, and digital. I think just driving away a little for a short second from the main topic of today's conversation, I believe the projects that are already being implemented in more tangible pillars, tangible physically, so transport and energy connections, have already proven to be resilient. We are investing very strongly in our energy independence, allowing us, Poland, Lithuania, Baltic countries, and many others in Central Europe, to be virtually independent from Russian gas, which seemed inconceivable 5-6 years ago. And I think this shows how effective the initiative can be. When it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to digital cooperation, well, I believe our Slovenian colleague had it just right. We shouldn't be panicking because we are doing very well. There was an increased number of attack attempts in the recent months. We all observed this across our countries. But in fact, just the information that there were more attempts didn't lead to any major problem on a scale that we could compare, for example, to Pietia or to NotPetya, because our systems are quite resilient. We are managing quite good. So I wouldn't agree that we are going through hell. We could be going through hell if we hadn't started doing what we are doing 5-10 years ago. Obviously, it's still not enough. We still need to build up. We still need to invest in creating more talent, attracting external talent, and also in better coordination between our national systems. Today's forum, today's event is a perfect example of this, because we can provide our national solutions. We can exchange experience, exchange the needs, exchange products that we deliver across various trades, but we will not be resilient if we don't cooperate cross-border. What is happening in the EU already, what is happening also in the countries of our region, and I believe we have a potential to be the leader, to be European leader here in Central Europe, not just limiting ourselves to the 3Cs initiative, but in general, this is, I believe, a good geographic description of where we are, where we have a competitive edge over some more developed economies, that we actually have better and more talent that can be also used for creating resilience in this area, that we are able to produce solutions for our domestic needs, but also to export these solutions. Already we are doing this on a larger and larger scale every week. And this is happening already. It's very good that today we will be talking about further increasing this cooperation, and we should be also talking about this in Riga. This is my expectation, that when it comes to the summit, we'll obviously be focusing on the immediate outcome of the war. How do we include Ukraine? How do we help Ukraine now? How do we support Ukraine today? But also, how do we help reconstruct Ukraine after the war, after Ukraine wins the war? But it will need huge support, not just to rebuild what was destroyed, but also to build new systems, more integrated with other countries. Even though it's still a process before Ukraine joins the EU, we should be much more open to integrate our security, our digital, our transport, our energy systems with Ukraine, because this will prove, this will lead to more resilience, also for us, not just for Ukraine, but also for us. And this is, when it comes to the Riga summit, we'll be talking about this, how to integrate politically, how to integrate on a symbolic level, but also we should be talking how to exchange our experiences, because Ukraine actually has suffered a lot more volume, and also in number and in intensity, in impact of cyber attacks, which you know better than me because you're the experts in this. I'm expert in foreign relations. But in terms of foreign relations, if we want to have stability, we need to cooperate in this, because there are not singular islands that we can isolate ourselves. We need to cooperate, and I believe what we started 7 years ago in 3Cs initiative is a perfect example of how effective it can be. So far, so good, but obviously still a lot needs to be done.
Thank you so much for this very powerful message, and I guess that this is heartwarming to hear that we are thinking in advance in helping and rebuilding the what is devastated in our neighboring country. And you also mentioned cross-border cooperation, and I would like to stick to the main element of that part. However, switching to maybe cooperation on a slightly different level, because between the public sector and the private sector. As I mentioned at the beginning, we do have on the stage top-notch experts from the private sector, and let's use this chance and look at the issue from their lenses, so to say. And I would like to start with Mr. Kania and ask rather trivial but super important in those times question. We know very well that countries are not whatsoever able to protect themselves without the support of the private sector, especially when it comes to the critical infrastructure in the cyberspace and related to the cyberspace. So how do business contribute to what's going on in Ukraine, and what are the results of those actions?
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me for this great panel. I mean, first of all, I really agree with Mr. Minister that we could have the hell, but it actually didn't happen. It's amazing how IT and communication technologies in Ukraine has been resilient and proven to work in such extreme circumstances. For me, it's a big positive surprise. So you know, to answer your question, let's start from the, I think, very basic point, which is, you know, businesses are providing technology, which is critical for this network to function. So the technology is getting better and better. It's amazing, and it is working. Secondly, what happened in Ukraine, but also what is happening in Poland, which I know very well, is that we are building the security systems according to, or we try to build those systems according to the right architecture. I'm sorry, it sounds very trivial, but it's important to understand that security systems are going through the massive transformation. You can do it, you can build it right, or you can do it wrong in the old way. It is important that we follow the modern and the current blueprint. Another thing which is very important to mention in terms of how business contributed to the situation in Ukraine and also in Poland is threat intelligence. I think this is very important, and this is what is important to mention. So, you know, I had the pleasure to work for the company which 80% of the internet traffic goes through the devices of our company, of Cisco. And we have very good view on the threat intelligence. We have a special group who are analyzing those threats. And with Ukraine, but also with all the important institutions in Poland, we have the agreement to fully and transparently share these threats, discuss them almost on the daily basis. And also, if possible, we have the possibility to program devices, security devices in Ukraine, in Poland, in every country, in line with those new threats which are spotted and discovered. And this is very important, because due to that fact, we can really be ready for the day zero attacks. Next thing which happened in Ukraine is that, I can certainly say this on behalf of my company, is that you know, we did absolutely everything possible to enable those network and communication systems in Ukraine to continue to function. As you can imagine, in the war situation, it was not easy. It required lots of ad hoc activities. I have to say that I am amazed by the spirit of the IT people from Ukraine. I know the stories of the people working to make the networks working literally in the bomb shells, in the bomb shelters. I am very proud of my team as well, that we, you know, as a Polish branch of the company, we've been very much exposed to help our Ukrainian colleagues. And all in all, what I said at the beginning, those networks are working in the amazing way, and they are actually contributing big time to the winning situation of the Ukraine. And also I can say, maybe to finish my part, is I am really impressed also by the way Polish government, Polish IT, Polish companies are working with Ukrainian colleagues. You know, we are sharing infrastructure, we are doing amazing things to make sure that the IT systems and the critical data are working and they are functioning in Ukraine. And that was possible, and this is amazing.
I guess that this is truly resilience in practice, right? fairly the same question to Mr. Carpenter. Sir, before this panel we had an excellent keynote, and we know that Google is doing tremendous effort to help. But we also heard that there is one another layer of your contribution coming from the Jigsaw side. Could we please expand on this topic and hear more how the company is actually supporting Ukraine and what's going out there and helping them to stay strong and safe?
Yes, thank you very much. Before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you to the organizers for having me. I am the Director of Policy and International Engagement for a unit within Google called Jigsaw, where we look to protect open societies from external threats. And we do so by building technology that is designed to inspire scalable solutions, which is part of what I want to talk about. But before that, just to talk a little bit more about what Royal had to say in the keynote, we have responded at a couple of different levels. One is the fact that across all of our surfaces that are used by millions of Ukrainians, everything from Gmail to Maps to Android to the Play Store, in each of these surfaces there have been issues that have been brought to our attention by individual Ukrainians, by the government, by NGOs that we collaborate with, and for each we've tried to take advantage of this new information to design new ways of doing things. So just a couple of quick examples. One is SOS Alert, which we put into practice when the refugee crisis really started, so that its ability to be able to alert people to where resources were located, which was really important. We are also working to secure accounts. Right away, we moved to secure as many accounts as we could, extending advanced protection to many Gmail users across Ukraine, particularly those who were most targeted, to ensure that protection was pushed directly. So there are a number of ways that we are contributing at the application level. But then we're just another example. There's an application, an air raid app that was used to notify people about when air raids were happening, and it was available in the Play Store, but people didn't know about it, and it was evaluated to be quite good. And so we helped to amplify downloads for that application. So I think there were 3.4 million people at the last time I looked using it. But that's only a part of what we're doing and what we have been doing. And I think it's important to note the point that was made about threat intelligence. Threat intelligence is a key part of kind of staying ahead of what's going to happen next. And of course, Google sees a lot of the world's traffic, and we have a threat assessment group who's quite strong. And so they've been tracking, and as I think it's been noted on this panel, none of this was terribly new to us. We've been observing what the Russians have been doing across Ukrainian networks and looking to defeat it. So when the time came, I think we were better prepared than many people thought. I think that resiliency that we've been talking about really did obtain. The other thing that we did right after the war began was we have a tool called Project Shield, which, as Royal was mentioning, protects websites that are not on anybody's cloud. They're on their own servers, but we can use Google's infrastructure as a reverse proxy to protect those sites. So 200 plus critical sites within Ukraine were protected by Google Shield right away. This is all both an opportunity where we saw threats and protect people in real time. But I do think that one of the lessons learned is that we need to be more advanced in our protections, just generally speaking. I recently was in Tallinn, Estonia, and I was struck by something that in that country, because they're targeted first and worst if we remember 2007, created a very strong immune response. And it's not just governments and the services and the cyber defenses that exist, but every individual in the country realizes that they need to be part of the solution. And I think that we, as the private sector, as governments, as the non-governmental sector, need to do much more in terms of alerting people to the types of tools that they can use to protect themselves and their organizations. And so maybe in the second round, I can tell you about a new program that we're launching today here at CyberSec that I'd love to tell you a bit more about.
That will be surprise also to me, but yes, indeed, let's come back exactly to this point. Very much looking forward. And yes, before we will start the second round of the questions, I would like to say that I hope to have a few minutes for the audience at the end of the session. So please be prepared with the questions that you might have. I will do my best to give you the opportunity to ask them to our distinguished guests. Mr. Silicki. Let's go back to the European level for a second, if we can. I mean, in your role as a member of executive board in ENISA, you are quite close to all the developments that are currently taking place. Minister mentioned NIS Directive 2. What is also around the corner is the Cyber Resiliency Act that, in my private opinion, might change a lot when it comes to cybersecurity ecosystem in Europe. But I'm very curious to hear your opinion on those two acts. Do you expect that this is going to be a groundbreaking development for the entire Union? And if yes, or if the potential is out there, what is critical to actually achieve a success in those areas?
Yeah, thank you for this question. The topic of the role of legislation in the area of fast developing, cybersecurity landscape is a key element. As you mentioned, the NIS Directive. NIS Directive was the first foundation of systematic approach to cybersecurity or network and information security in European Union. And when you imagine that it started to be operational in 2016, what means that it was prepared 3 years earlier, 2013, and now we have 2022. This importance of new version of this directive is out of the question. So NIS2 is going further. In my opinion, will be a little breakthrough for the further, implementation of common rules in European member states. So in NIS 1. We have essential service operators, which are defined by the entities authorized to do it in each country. In the NIS2, many more sectors, many more enterprises or organizations which will be covered by NIS2. So it's a big development, and it is not all. As you mentioned about this Cyber Resilience Act, but before we should mention Cybersecurity Act. So the act when the cybersecurity certification on the European level was defined in 2019. Currently, it's still in the preliminary phase, but I think it will be really growing up faster in the nearest future. And what is more, we are talking about the critical infrastructure. Let's remember that in this area we have the directive from 2008. For critical infrastructure, when only 2 sectors are defined, energy and transport, if I remember correctly. Now, in the draft directive for resilience of critical entities, we have 10 sectors. And what is very positive, legislators on the European level started to think jointly about those many legislations which are, because the cybersecurity is transsectoral and horizontal, so they started to think how to not, developing the different legislation for different, how to say, areas, and those sectors from NIS2 and those sectors from draft resilience directive are quite synchronized. So it means that we are starting to think, as I said, horizontally about the cybersecurity. And of course, also, which was missing in NIS was obligation for vendors, for suppliers. So this topic of supply chains, cybersecurity, and of course, Cyber Resilience Act is going on to this direction. So when we meet after, let's say, 1.5 years, we will probably be in a different situation because this regulation will be covering much more than currently. And additionally, I would like to underline that we also so the legislation is very important, but we should think about better, use what we have in legislation. So of course, when we were talking about this cooperation, several instruments existing are very good, and they are really proving that this cooperation is going on. In non-PTR, CSET networks started to share the information between CSERTs on the European level. Now, without such a mechanism of information sharing before European CSERTs, we will not be so prepared for rapid reaction to what we have now in terms of this war in Ukraine. So not only think about new legislation, but using what we have. It's also quite important.
Thank you so much. And coming back to Minister Andrijanić, because and actually linked it to the previous intervention, because we mentioned European level, we mentioned already existing legislation, and yes, indeed, at the end of the day, someone needs to implement that, and someone is responsible ultimately for the end goal. And whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, it's all about the nation states being responsible for providing security to citizens and private sector that functions within the borders. What is being done in your country? What are the priorities for protecting infrastructure over there? What do you do to assure your citizens that they are well protected?
We do a lot, but before I go into detail, let me comment on what has been said so far. Now, at the European level, I would like to highlight the importance of the European Electric Communications Code and its transposition into national legislations, which is running behind schedule in many European countries. And this communications code basically features a number of cybersecurity protections when it comes to our communication systems and services. So I think it's really important for all the member states to transpose this code into national legislations ASAP. The second issue at the European level is also the 5G toolbox, or let's say the infamous 5G toolbox. We're also running late when it comes to implementing many of those recommendations, especially those related to high-risk vendors in many European countries. So there needs to be a renewed sense of urgency when it comes to the safety of all critical systems, but especially communications. We have the legislation, we have the recommendations at our disposal, but it's up to member states to obviously implement them. And I would basically here recommend or push the European Commission for a more proactive approach and for, I would say, greater authority over these issues over member states, just to ensure that we have a harmonized approach to different kind of cyber threats across the continent. Now, when it comes to the 3Cs initiative, a super important organization, or let's say initiative for not just us here in the region, but also for the entire Europe, I think. And let me give you one very specific example. So during our presidency, Slovenia organized the first ministerial session when it comes to the 3C summit. Of course, we were assembling the ministers for digital transformation, and it was an incredible event because it allowed us to basically exchange best practices in e-government, e-health, and other public digital services. And it really showed that this region is at the forefront of digital transformation. We were, and we continue to be, the first ones to embrace cutting-edge solutions in various areas. This is a region that's not afraid of the word reform and change. This is something that we've been growing with for the past couple of decades. And the great thing is that the community of ministers for digital transformation in the region really allowed us to intervene effectively when the Ukrainian war broke out. And I can say that in the first week of the war, together with Minister Cieszyński, we organized a joint call with all the digital ministers in the region and the Ukrainian Minister for Digital Affairs, Fedorov, to discuss what kind of tech support we need to provide to Ukraine, ASAP. And out of this came a pan-European initiative that led to thousands of Starlinks and many other pieces of equipment being shipped to Ukraine in a matter of days, not weeks or months. So this is real solidarity in action. You don't need to be a super formalized institution to make sure that things move fast. And I would really commend the government of Poland, also the government of Ukraine, for doing a spectacular job, ensuring the safety and obviously the urgent support that the Ukrainian institutions need at the time being. Now, as for Slovenia, we were a nation born out of war. We won an independence war 30 years ago. So we know very well what security means. Luckily, our war lasted for 11 days, but our friends in the Balkans did not get that lucky. So we were living with war for most of the 90s, and we've started investing in our cybersecurity capabilities back then already. And today, I'm proud to say that we have a super capable government office dealing with cybersecurity. They're the national coordinators between the Defense Department and all the other key departments covering the critical infrastructure. We decided not to have 2 or 3 institutions dealing with cybersecurity. We have one, and it's super well organized. Obviously, as I mentioned before, talent is in short supply. That's why we're introducing a Army Reserve composed of cybersecurity specialists. These are the people that our state cannot afford to employ, but we can call them in whenever our critical infrastructure, or let's say our country, is under attack. We have also established a cyber range that's not just open to the state institutions, but also to Slovenian companies, precisely to make sure their systems are as resilient as possible. And here, I'm not just talking about our major banks or insurance companies or telcos and other big ones. I'm also talking about smaller and medium-sized companies that I personally have been very much focused on in the past year. What we're doing for them is handing out vouchers worth up to 10,000 euros that allow them to basically purchase things like cybersecurity trainings, software, hardware, whatever they need to basically raise the level of their cyber resilience. This is what we're doing when it comes to the institutions and the private sector. And at the end, I would also emphasize how important it is to raise awareness across the entire society. And that's why a couple of months ago, we adopted the Digital Inclusion Act. It's one of the first pieces of legislation dealing with digital skills in Europe. It's something I'm incredibly proud of. And this piece of legislation will allow us to start the biggest digital skilling program in our nation's history in 3 months' time. And it will provide all the generations with free digital skilling, either when it comes to basic or advanced digital skills. But part of every single subsidized class, course, or workshop will be a quick guide on how to safely and responsibly navigate in the cyberspace. So this is something that we're doing, and on top of that, we're also launching a big awareness campaign when it comes to cyber threats among our citizens, because obviously we need to have them alert, not just when it comes to cyber attacks, but also when it comes to misinformation and disinformation. It's a super important topic. We're not just talking about cyber threats, we're talking about hybrid warfare that we should bear in mind always. And here I think there's a big need for all the big social media platforms to do more, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, because we are the first line of attack, so to speak. And this is a conversation that we've had at the European level again and again, and it needs to be repeated. The big platforms need to ensure that they have more native speakers among content moderators, no matter how big the country is. Whether it's a 40 million Poland or a 2 million Slovenia, it doesn't matter. They need to have local staff on the ground, making sure that the content is properly and obviously instantly curated in the sense that will not endanger our democratic society and values.
Thank you so much for very inspiring good practices coming from Slovenia, but also for the wake-up call to the political leaders to act here and now and do the homework when it comes to the implementation of already existing solutions. Coming back, if I may, to Madam Ilves, and actually touching a little bit on your role as the advisor to the president of Latvia. I mean, in your role, you do have this absolutely unique possibility to shape the direction when it comes to the digital policy of your country. And maybe I can ask about 3 or 4 or how many you wish recommendations on what should be done and how it can be done to go through the digital transformation securely.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, the list can be very long, and I never know how my day starts and how it will end, because it pretty much includes nowadays everything when it's digital. But actually, Minister did an amazing job already laying out the whole landscape, and I also was happy to learn that we all think alike in a way. So it will make me easier for me to sort of sum up, and I will say, I will sort of prioritize 3 things that also the president has spoken up in Latvia, and we've led a number of initiatives, and I think number 1 is really human resources. We're really focusing on people, on enabling people, and it's so many different ways, you know, bridging digital divide. Every country does have a digital divide. We all have citizens that don't have digital skills, and then we obviously go level and level up. So one of concrete initiatives under the Latvian president was to actually ensure that every child in school has a computer, not a touch screen, not an old cell phone, but rather a proper simple computer that a child, once he leaves the school, is well equipped to enter a better universities or a job market. So really investing, I think human capital is currently, I think, top priority for everyone, but also in Latvia. And then we build upon, obviously, security and other specials. Like you mentioned, Tallinn and Estonian awareness about, that you are part of secure solution. It's not that every single Estonian is trained in cybersecurity, but it comes with a common sort of skill of how you use technologies, with the fact that you have a trustworthy identity, that you understand that someone is identifiable online. And you do that with a proper ID card. You don't have a fake accounts or bot accounts, etc. But you operate as a responsible citizen, and you have sort of that mindset built up through the skills. So human resources is number one. A second, obviously, is the security, which, of course, the war kind of has brought on forefront. I feel over these years that what COVID helped to push us digitization. In a sort of, if there's a good side effect of 2 years of pandemic crisis, the war, I think, has brought cybersecurity forefront, and I hope it will accelerate how we sort of improve cybersecurity. My big stumbling block in this sort of cybersecurity is how do we make security embedded in solutions when they are designed. It's so typical still to add cybersecurity or think about security after you scale. The famous sort of tech world goal to achieve, let me scale my solution, and only then you think about security. And when I think of EU Recovery Fund, which is 750 billion, which is mandatory to be spent 20% of that on digital. I wonder why can't we put in that percent saying, you have to spend 10 or 15% of those on cybersecurity. It has to be mandatory. We have to budget in money at the beginning. Security it doesn't come at no cost. It always has a cost. It has a human cost, intellectual, proprietary, software, etc. So that's something I'm trying to discuss, debate. I think it might be something that can be discussed even at EU level to create this pattern that all the sort of solutions have to have security already from the beginning you design idea or project. And the third, as the minister also has mentioned, and it's in my portfolio working with President, and he's extremely concerned, of course, is information space. That's something that really drives us apart. It becomes very difficult to have a dialogue in a society between people if we don't share facts, if we don't operate with the same information. We can have different opinions, and that's fine, but it's really difficult to discuss if your departure point is actually completely abstract, invented facts that are not true. It's not about opinions, it's about actually getting basics right. And that's where I'm really looking for cooperation with companies, with big tech. They have a knowledge. They see, I know that the Jigsaw also works a lot of how you can sort of analyze and help to clean up that ecosystem. Latvia hosts NATO Strategic Communications Center. They recently ran an experiment, and it's still true that you can buy very cheap bots and you can buy very cheap comments inauthentic, and you cannot get rid of them. You can later on notify, and they still stay up. And so I think there are some work that needs just more attention, and we have to sort of, that's a priority also on our menu to work together. I think the point that you made is excellent, that we need a local contextual people who can analyze and help to clean this information space in the native language. It's all very much tied into every national information space. Hopefully the companies will boost up that capacity, but there is a lot where we have to find this synergy, because of course none of us wants to also limit freedom of speech. We are also extremely careful about that, and we're really paying attention that doesn't turn into censorship, but that's something that we have to together hopefully figure out.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed, cybersecurity by design and by default is a dream, and that's why I'm hoping so much for the cybersecurity resiliency act, and let's see how it's going to look like at the end, but yeah, hopes are also out there. Coming back to Minister Jabłoński, if I may, and a slightly different question, but I think super interesting for the audience. a few days ago, last week was it, I think, the EU, together with the member states, publicly attributed one cyber attack that took place in Ukraine to Russian state actors. It was a huge development when it comes to cyber diplomacy, and my question to you is, how do you see it from the cyber deterrence perspective, and how can actually, by looking at this example, cyber diplomacy impact cost-benefit analysis of the threat actors, meaning increase our security at the end of the day? And taking this chance, I'm not sure to what extent you will be able to answer my question, but could you please shed at least a little bit of light on the political negotiations between ironing out this statement that we all heard last week?
It is indeed sometimes difficult for diplomats to use proper names for things, because diplomacy is the art of telling what things that are sometimes unpleasant in the most pleasant way. But where we have been before the 24th of February was entirely different reality. And before that, we often had, we collectively as Europe, we often had many in both in official documents and also statements, there was a lot of reluctance to actually call out Russia for what it was doing in order not to provoke any retaliation, because there was this sense among many diplomats, leaders, that if we would not provoke Russia, Russia will not strike, which obviously turned out not to be true, because Russia does not need any excuses, it doesn't need any provocation, they just have very hostile intentions, and they went on implementing these intentions while this brutal invasion on Ukraine was totally unprovoked, and they do not seem to need any reasons to act this way. So this is in this whole terrible situation that we are once this war started. It is at least good that we started to call things as they are, because it is no secret that attempts or successful attacks in the past were also coordinated by Russia, by a state organization or organizations or some entities working very closely with the Kremlin. And the fact that right now it is easier to tell it the way it actually is will, in my opinion, lead to a much clearer situation. Because if we are able to identify our enemy, we are able to take appropriate countermeasures. We are able to isolate Russia from many from many organizations that previously it was difficult to do it if we would be only telling it, beating around the bush and just telling that there is some unnamed threat from the east. It's good to do it at this point, even though we obviously prefer that the main reason for it didn't ever come to fruition, the war that was started. And I think that if we, depending on how long the war will last, how will the developments continue to occur, what happened since 24th of February is in many regards a point of no return in terms of actually being able to call out the criminal behind these attacks. And I hope we will continue to do it, because this is the only way. If we want to be resilient to these attacks, we need to be open about what is the source, and we need to be also ready to take appropriate actions to direct it in a way that would be most efficient. So if we want to, for example, right now this is also a topic for probably entirely different conversation, but as we are observing now, there is a huge interest of many Russian IT specialists of actually leaving Russia, because they understand that with the sanctions mechanisms, they won't be able to work in a way they wished before. And many of them do not have any malicious intentions, but obviously will be trying to find a space to use the talents in our countries. We shouldn't be against this, but we should be very careful. We should be very careful not to allow ourselves something that could lead to potential negative consequences to our national systems. But if we are able to identify it and not pretend that there isn't this big elephant in the room, this is in general much better for our safety.
Thank you so much. We are running a little bit of time, but I assume that since we started later, we can still a few minutes from the coffee break. I promise it's going to be quick. Quick question to Mr. Kania, sir. From the Cisco perspective and looking at the supply chain element of the entire cybersecurity equation, you are one of the leaders when it comes to understanding threats stemming from this area. One advice to the operators of the critical infrastructure to protect themselves from attacks oriented at their supply chains.
Okay, so I will be very brief, I promise. So it's quite simple. My advice would be you should treat the entire infrastructure and IT systems of your supply chain as your company and build a security policy like your own security policy. 5 years ago, it sounded like an unrealistic statement, but these days I think we all agree that is doable. Pandemia, changes in the technologies are allowing that. Believe it or not, but we've been doing this since many years, and we have very outsourced supply chain. So make sure that every part of your supply chain follows your zero trust policy, that everyone is on the dual factor authentication, that everyone is meeting your criteria of the endpoints. Make sure that you have robust cloud security policy and seek technologies to control the traffic and react if something is wrong. Simply treat your entire supply chain like your own company and run security policy in the same way. It is possible today. It can be done actually quite easily with the current state of the technologies.
Thank you so much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, crème de la crème. Last question to Mr. Carpenter. Sir, Jigsaw is all about innovation. It's all about thinking out of the box. And I'm pretty sure that right now you will tell us a little bit more about how can we be innovative when it comes to the protection of critical infrastructure? What can we do differently? And what are the trends out there? And what is the surprise?
Well, I know I have to be brief.
I think that we have time for that. I'm looking at is how we do.
Yes. So obviously, many of the points that have been made on this panel about the difficulties in languages, smaller languages, the challenges of account security. We've been talking a lot about critical infrastructure, and that is existentially important for sure. But we've also heard about the need to educate our publics and to bring them alongside us and to encourage them to protect themselves and to protect their organization. So I'm really delighted to announce that today here at CyberSec we have created a program and kicked off a program called Protect Your Democracy. And Protect Your Democracy is a portfolio of tools that are free, open source, easy to use, that both protect the free and open web, protect access to information to websites, that do more to enhance account security, and also do a bit more to protect the public square in terms of conversations. And we're packaging these tools together in this Protect Your Democracy, we also say PYD, in a way that we hope, because we're going to have it available in 35 languages across the region. We're launching it here in Central and Eastern Europe first. It's available in Polish, Czech, Ukrainian, and a number of other languages, and we'll continue to roll that out over the course of the year, and then hopefully go global sometime toward the end of the year. But we're not doing this alone. We're not doing this alone. We want to do this with partners. So there is an outreach component to non-governmental organizations, think tanks, to human rights defenders, other elements of civil society, and of course we want to talk with our government partners who are also on the stage. So I'm really grateful that I had a minute or two to introduce that, and I am really looking forward to the deeper collaboration that Google and Jigsaw can have in this fight that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful news. I'm pretty sure that in case of questions, we might go to the Google booth and potentially ask all about that initiatives. With that, unfortunately, we are obliged to end. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for participation. Thank you to our speakers. And please join me in the round of applause for our guests.